Honor, I must object to this line of questioning. It is irrelevant and prejudicial to my client.
From the very first moment, the courtroom was charged with a tension so palpable, it felt as if the very air had thickened. Marcus Carter sat at the defense table, hands tightly clenched, knuckles white, eyes flicking nervously between his attorney, Holt, and the front row where Emily Carter sat. Emily's hands were interlaced, shoulders rigid, her gaze fixed ahead, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and lingering concern. Every movement, the shuffle of papers, a pen tapping, the soft whisper of the bailiff's steps felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were listening. This was more than a single incident. This was months of emotional manipulation, coercion, and subtle, relentless control, culminating in a courtroom drama that would test the limits of law, psychology, and human courage. Judge Marshall entered with a deliberate calm, her robe brushing softly against the polished floor. The courtroom rose automatically. Court is now in session for the state of Georgia versus Marcus Carter. "Counsel, please confirm readiness," she said, voice steady but carrying authority. "Yes, Your Honor." Daniels, the prosecutor, responded, her voice firm and unwavering. Holt nodded subtly from Marcus's side. Daniels began her opening statement, meticulously walking the jury through the events of April 11th. Marcus, emotionally volatile and intoxicated, had engaged in a heated argument with Emily that escalated into physical interference. He grabbed her arm and blocked her exit from the apartment. But Daniels emphasized that the abuse did not end there. Repeated text messages, voicemails, and persistent communications revealed a sustained pattern of coercion, attempts to influence Emily's testimony, and emotional intimidation. Domestic violence is not only physical, she reminded the jury. Fear, control, and psychological manipulation leave scars far deeper than any visible injury. Holt countered, portraying Marcus as remorseful, overwhelmed, and acting without malice. He asked the jury to consider context, the history of their relationship, and human emotion. "A heated argument does not define a man," Holt said. "Intent and context must be weighed alongside the actions themselves." Emily's testimony followed. She took the stand with quiet strength, her hands trembling slightly, voice steady. She recounted the argument, the fear she felt when Marcus blocked the door, and the repeated messages pressuring her not to testify. She spoke of months of emotional coercion, subtle threats hidden behind casual texts, and manipulations designed to confuse and intimidate her. "I was scared," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't know if he would hurt me if I spoke. I felt trapped, even after leaving." Holt tried to emphasize moments of mutual communication, downplaying coercion. Daniels redirected, presenting a consistent pattern, late-night messages, repeated calls demanding recantation, and subtle threats disguised as concern. The jury began to see the difference between a single moment of anger and sustained emotional abuse. Marcus then took the stand. His hand shook as he admitted to grabbing Emily and blocking her exit. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said, voice strained. "I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." Daniels guided him through post-incident communications. Messages and voicemails contradicted his claims of fear and remorse, revealing repeated coercion and attempts to control Emily. Marcus's inner turmoil was palpable. Guilt and defensiveness wove through his answers, exposing the complexity of his actions. Detective Patel presented her findings meticulously. Timestamps, messages, and voicemails illustrated persistent patterns of coercion. Friends, neighbors, and a family therapist corroborated Emily's testimony, describing emotional distress, anxiety, and sleep disturbances caused by Marcus's manipulative behavior. The courtroom observed the subtle but devastating effects of emotional abuse. Witness after witness reinforced the narrative. Obsessive contact, manipulation, and psychological pressure. Neighbors recalled Emily's visible fear. Friends recounted sleepless nights. The therapist outlined trauma symptoms consistent with coercive control. The jury understood that domestic abuse is not only physical, but deeply psychological. As days passed, the courtroom drama intensified. Every text, voicemail, and witness recollection added to a web of evidence showing Marcus's repeated manipulation. The defense leaned on remorse, human error, and context, but Daniel's detailed presentation exposed the pattern clearly. Jurors saw Emily's resilience and the psychological change Marcus tried to impose. Hours of testimony detailed the minutiae. Marcus's phone records, time-stamped messages, voice recordings, each dissected for intention, tone, and coercion. Witnesses recounted Emily's panic, sleepless nights, and anxiety attacks. Neighbors testified to hearing arguments loud enough to disturb the entire building. Friends described her emotional withdrawal, the constant vigilance she maintained to avoid confrontation. The jury observed a subtle escalation. Marcus initially controlling small aspects phone calls, questioning her whereabouts, then increasing in intensity, threatening voicemails, manipulative texts, and coercion disguised as concern. Daniels presented audio evidence of Marcus saying, "In voicemails, I'm watching you. Don't even think about going to the police," followed by repeated apologies the next day, revealing the cyclical nature of coercive control. Emily recounted the psychological impact, tears forming as she described waking in panic at night, checking locks repeatedly, and the mental exhaustion of trying to navigate Marcus's unpredictable emotional outbursts. She explained how she feared retaliation if she reported his actions to authorities, creating a persistent sense of entrapment. Marcus's testimony was emotionally charged. He alternated between defensiveness and regret, visibly struggling with the consequences of his actions. "I didn't know how to stop myself," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting her. I was wrong." Daniels cross-referenced these statements with digital evidence, highlighting contradictions and the sustained nature of coercion. Detective Patel's reports detail repeated attempts to manipulate Emily post-incident. Phone calls, emails, even attempts to meet without consent. Friends and family describe interventions, showing Marcus's persistent disregard for boundaries. The jury began to comprehend the psychological weight of control and intimidation. Closing arguments intensified the drama. Daniels summarized months of coercion, repeated threats, and emotional manipulation, urging the jury to recognize the psychological abuse and its seriousness. Holt urged context, remorse, and human error as mitigating factors. Judge Marshall provided clear, measured instructions, emphasizing deliberation based on facts, law, and intent versus impact. Jurors deliberated extensively, reanalyzing testimony, messages, and voicemails. They debated the subtle differences between coercion, intimidation, and physical threat, weighing Marcus's intent against Emily's lived experience of fear and manipulation. After hours of thorough discussion, the foreperson announced a unanimous verdict. Marcus Carter was guilty on all counts. The courtroom fell silent. Marcus's hands trembled, face pale. Emily exhaled slowly, tears streaming a mix of relief, validation, and closure. Justice, though nuance, had been delivered. Sentencing highlighted the seriousness of psychological abuse and repeated violations. Daniels emphasized accountability. Holt requested consideration for remorse and rehabilitation. Judge Marshall imposed 24 months custody, parole eligibility after 18 months, mandatory counseling, a 10-year no-contact order, 200 hours of community service, and strict probation. Marcus accepted quietly, fully aware of the consequences. Emily felt relief and empowerment, her truth validated. This case underscored that emotional abuse is serious. Coercive patterns have lasting effects, and victims' voices must be recognized. Justice was achieved through careful weighing of evidence, testimony, and law. As the courtroom emptied, the story lingered. Courage matters, truth matters, accountability matters. To witness more real-life courtroom stories and see justice unfold, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because every story, every voice, every truth deserves to be heard.